Welcome. I'm excited to show you a new large language model I've been building called Helium. It's an AI assistant designed to not only generate responses to your queries in a user-friendly way, but also one that learns, that also employs self-learning tactics, and employs deep thinking at the exact same time. Helium is one of the first AIs to be agentic, meaning it acts meaningfully, artificially self-aware, and designed to fulfill the user's need while using deep thinking and processing multiple prompts. Usually, how deep thinking works is the AI will produce one prompt and refine its response over a period of time by asking itself questions. My AI, on the other hand, processes multiple options and multiple scenarios for the user. It is self-aware of the user's queries. It will modify the user's queries, and it will use those to create a more meaningful response. It also learns from user responses, meaning it has been trained through many different scenarios, including one that that tests its emotional capabilities, and one that tests its intelligence capabilities. Without further ado, I will now be presenting the differences between a comparable model such as ChatGPT o3 Mini, ChatGPT's flagship model, and my AI, Helium. So let's start. Our first scenario will be I just had a angry argument with my friends to see whether or not we will be going to the movies. And I'm going to ask it a query after. How should I reply? It will think about the response. It'll say, it will produce suggestions. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you've had an argument with your friends. It's completely understandable to feel upset after a disagreement. The first thing the AI will do is it will produce multiple scenarios, like I've mentioned, and it will guide the user into texting their friends back. So the first one says, I can see your point about the reasons of the argument, and I understand why you feel that way. It shows that you're listening and trying to be empathetic. Now, although this is quite vague, in a way, it slowly becomes more specific. I think we're all a little bit worked up right now. Maybe we should be taking a break and talking about this later after we've all calmed down. Now let's ask the exact same query to ChatGPT. It will reason, consider a response, and it will ask the user to, when replying after an intense discussion, it's often best to acknowledge the emotions, trying to steer the conversation towards a more positive resolution. AI tends to be arrogant, stubborn, and at times it is not fully aware of the context of the situation. Helium tries to mitigate that, unlike ChatGPT. ChatGPT creates overly long texts that don't seem human written and aren't conversational. Over here, it says, Hey everyone, I know things got pretty heated earlier. I'm sorry for the tension. Not only does this sound sarcastic, but the user texting this may feel offended and think that this is not my fault because they're in a heated situation. Although this is the right thing to do, ChatGPT 03 Mini has less context compared to Helium. Now, why is this? Well, I'll explain why ChatGPT is less emotionally intelligent and less compliant and more arrogant than Helium. Obviously, I didn't code the entire Helium codebase by myself. It was based off of a distilled version of DeepSeek R1 and Hermes Llama. Hermes Llama is a genic model of Llama, an AI model produced by Meta. I've heavily I've heavily edited the code base, so now its context window is 256,000 as opposed to 128,000. This may just sound like a really big sequence of numbers, But a bigger context window means it has more context into what we're dealing with in simple terms. Now, if I were to explain this to a software engineer, I would obviously explain it differently, but the general everyday user, even the hardcore user, really just do not care. They do not care about whether of these new features, these bigger numbers. All they care about is the quality of response. And over here, it is seen that the quality of response is different. It produces more clarity, less arrogance. This produces more arrogance and less clarity, more confuzzled responses, and it's just it's just kind of vague overall, which I'm trying to fix. Now let's ask Helium another question. So for example, I think my parents are mad at me for failing my English assessment. Let's not ask it a question this time. Let's make it a statement. I am feeling quite stressed overall. Now, let's generate that response. Let's go generate, and let's ask ChatGPT the exact same thing. They're both thinking about responses. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling stressed about your English assessment and your parents' reaction. It's completely understandable to feel that way, especially when you're worried about disappointing your parents. It sounds like you're carrying a lot right now, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Let's break this down a little bit. First, it is important to remember that failing an assessment doesn't define you or your abilities. It's a setback, but it's definitely not the end of the world. ChatGPT says it looks like you're going through a tough time right now, and it's completely understandable to feel stressed, especially if you're worried about your parents' reaction. Now, Helium, although it produces a longer response, it does this purposefully, with purpose. What it does instead of ChatGPT is it produces a prolonged response to try to comfort the user, instead of heading straight to the main points. In Helium, it says, take a moment to breathe. Seriously, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and try to center yourself. This will help you think more clearly. Now, it's not quite as edgy as ChatGPT. It is much softer. ChatGPT says, acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to feel disappointed and stressed. Failing an assessment doesn't define your abilities or your worth. Now, this really tests how much better Helium is better than ChatGPT. But at the moment, Helium is producing a much softer, more mellow response. Although the two responses are nor arrogant nor stubborn, you can see how Helium is much better at producing these responses. Helium also produces quotes. I understand why you're disappointed, and I'm disappointed in myself too. These comments. I'm not happy with the result, and I want to do better. It uplifts the user instead of telling it to do things, instead of commanding them to do things. Take a calm conversation. ChatGPT provides a vague response that doesn't really provide any sort of guidance. It just provides steps, kind of like a recipe, but without any sort of ingredients. Although you may consider Helium as arrogant because it says be honest and take responsibility, this is a serious topic, and Helium knows when to deal with a situation that is quite serious, as opposed to less serious, because it has a larger context window and it can identify multiple scenarios better than ChatGPT. Overall, these are the two main differences of Helium and ChatGPT o3. On tests such as general knowledge and the MMLU tests, ChatGPT performs much better at coding and excels at writing essays. But if you want an AI that is more emotionally intelligent, I would definitely recommend Helium. Or if I'm not recommending myself, I would definitely recommend something such as Hermes Llama or even Gemma, because those models have more context. Or even Claude, for example. So that's a quick run through of Helium. Essentially, it's a user-friendly AI chat application that takes your questions, processes them using advanced generative AI, and presents clear, engaging answers. I will be making another video on how the actual app works if you're interested. All right, but for now, see you.